Look, as an outsider, it did feel like Candace Owens's sort of response to Kirk's murder was in many ways the most like heartfelt, authentic. It
Yes.
felt like
Yes, it was a
it
lot
was a
more
real
heartfelt than
friend.
Erica Kirk. I mean, she actually, and certainly more than Benjamin Netanyahu. Yeah. So back to your question, Benjamin Netanyahu needed to claim Charlie Kirk's legacy because he took on this mystical martyr figure after his killing that was going to loom large over the conservative movement. And Netanyahu needs white conservative Christian males who join the military to go fight and die for his self-proclaimed Jewish state. That's why they needed Charlie Kirk. So he goes out and lies about him. And then we presented the truth. It came out of independent media. And then some other actors actually took it to the next level and said, actually, Bibi had him iced. And that destroyed Netanyahu's whole narrative. And it really shows just how deeply hated he and Israel are across the board in the online culture in which all young people in the United States get their news and views. And it speaks to the total PR collapse. Then, you brought up what Candace Owens is doing by questioning the official story. All of those people who are extremely online, who are under 40 or under 35, are questioning the official story too, because it doesn't add up. They haven't produced the evidence to convict Tyler Robinson in the mind of the American public. Luigi Mangione, I don't see that many people questioning it. There were like some elements that I wanted to question, like how did he get so close so quickly to Central Park after doing the shooting? But it seems like he wanted to do it. But in this one, there's a lot of questions that are being fueled by the investigation itself, like the fabricated text messages, or apparently fabricated text messages between him and his like furry trans lover that we just haven't heard from, who
Do you
seems
think
to
that
have disappeared.
they're fabricated? I mean, like I understand what the narrative was. It felt like not an organic conversation that you would expect between two people of that age, etc. But your view is that I mean, you feel that way as well, or is there additional evidence that
I
they
mean,
were in
look at the
fact
language.
not authentic?
Look at the language, my love or my dear. I mean, what 22-year-old talks to their lover like, my love, I am going to
I know
retrieve
some of my
the weapon
girlfriends and I
from
were
the
like, we're
vehicle.
jealous. Where do we find a man like this? Is what we were asking each other. But
Well,
yeah,
you'd
like
say baby or something. What do you say as a 22-year-old? Like, when I was 22, I'm a Gen Xer. We didn't talk like that. And it looks like a 65-year-old law enforcement agent wrote those. There are no timestamps. Kash Patel said, we have found a manifesto, but it got lost, so we have to forensically reconstruct it. There are no screenshots of the text messages. Just give us some screenshots at least.
well,
And
this is why.
they,
Yeah, go
they
ahead. I'm
they they
sorry.
provide a very neatly distilled confession. At the same time, it's not clear he's cooperating. And a judge just put tons of discovery under lock and key so the media can't report on it. So they need to be more transparent. The autopsy doesn't seem to exist. There are all these questions about the ballistics, the exit wound. His comms
Yeah,
director,
what do you
Andrew
make of
Kolvitz,
all of
says
that?
it's just like it's all the way that it's being framed all fuels public mistrust. And the public already does not trust the official story of anything, which is partly how Trump got reelected. And I just want to make a larger point, which is that we are now living in the years of engraved lead. That's what I call it. The Italian years of lead were characterized by a series of deep state plots involving NATO, the CIA, Italian security services to prevent a communist insurgency. Two of the major points were 1969, the Milan cafe bombing staged by the CIA and Italian security services using local fascist stay behind elements to frame Italian anarchists in order to discredit the left. In 1979, the Red Brigades kidnapping Prime Minister Aldo Moro, who was someone who was coalitioning with socialists they said he's not radical enough and he's going to cut a deal with the Social Democrats, so we have to kill him. It turns out the Red Brigades were heavily penetrated by CIA, and some even suspect Mossad because Aldo Moro was quietly allowing the transfer of weapons to PLO factions. So why did they do that? Well, yeah, to discredit the left, but also to create a sense of chaos and fear as they struggled for credibility in order to force the population to the center and to close ranks with the security state. It's kind of the same narrative we see repackaged again and again during BLM, January 6th.
Like, is consistent with the history of the FBI and COINTELPRO operations are 85% or something like that against the left, which brings me to sort of an elephant in the room for our like collective media space, which is that we've been, told by one of our community's foremost First Amendment journalists and free speech advocates in the course of his reporting on the Twitter files that the censorship, the crackdowns were overwhelmingly against the right. And while I thought that was really useful reporting and covered it extensively on Rising and also on this show, I felt that without knowing what you were given by Elon Musk, it was difficult to know, to be able to state that. If you don't know what the totality of the information is out there, you can report on what you're given, but you can't make claims about the sort of the emphasis or the overall focus of right versus left crackdowns by the state. And now we're living in this world where not only is our crackdowns against Palestinian students and professors, getting rid of entire Arab studies departments at elite institutions and non-elite institutions, deporting or threatening to report and incarcerating grad students for months because they've written op-eds critical of Israel. I don't have to enumerate to you all of the ways that speech has been imperiled for citizens and non-citizens alike by Israel, by pressure from Israel not to report critically of them. And we have Matt Taibbi, who has made this claim that most of the crackdowns are against the right as opposed to the left, sort of silent in this moment, or not just silent in this moment, pushing back against folks who are wondering why he hasn't reported on any of those kinds of speech issues with the following kinds of excuse making. He tweeted, and I believe this was just yesterday as we're recording this, in response to someone who said, I agree with you, Matt, but man, not having you out front with the bullhorn about Gaza is just a disgrace. He responded, if you know what you think about it to the point of knowing what I should say about it, what do you need me for? And this is the tone of a response he's given in the past, which is to say, everyone else is talking about Gaza, why should I? And I do wonder what you make of this sort of gap in his coverage and his interest.
Well, I've never seen someone spend so much time and energy explaining why he shouldn't spend an ounce of time or energy on Israel and Gaza, and specifically on one of the most powerful and most censorious forces in the United States today and across the West, which is the Zionist movement. And he seems to be, for various reasons, afraid to critique power. He had this sense that power was being exerted through the liberal establishment during the Trump era to spin out a series of deceptions, intelligence intrigues like Russiagate, and produce some really good reporting there. The Twitter files supported that. Twitter files were obviously courtesy of Elon. Elon is someone who has a massive political and economic empire, which is interwoven with Zionist power. In fact, Elon launched an Israeli spy satellite through his SpaceX recently from Florida. No one talked about that. Elon's basically been captured. He's supposed to be the richest man in the world, but he's been captured by an even more powerful force, which has captured the entire Trump administration.
Like how? Like, why is this happening, Max? Like, I've asked a lot of guests this. Like, what is it? Is it just compromise? I mean, is the sort of Epstein of it all that everyone has some horrible, like something so horrible that they've done on them that it doesn't matter if you're literally the richest man in the world, you still can't stand up to Israel?
Well, there may be elements of blackmail or compromise, but that's usually something that comes out when you start to emerge as a threat. What really happens here, like with a figure like Marco Rubio, who was he when he was a young man? He was sort of like a party guy, frat guy who was on the make from the Gusano world of South Florida, who wanted to be a big power player. And so he meets his future pimp, Paul Singer of Elliott Capital Management, who's an Israel First billionaire, starts cultivating him along with AIPAC donors. Same thing with so many of the cabinet level figures in the Trump administration. And Jeffrey Epstein is in the middle of this, but it's sort of like he's just in the middle of this post-war financial infrastructure that is heavily Zionist. And when I say heavily Zionist, yes, it's heavily Jewish, but it's part of the Jewish world that, that disgusts me, that I totally despise. But it's also, there are many Jews who also despise it. There's sort of like always been this war within the Jewish world, and they continually win because they have all the financial resources and they have political power. Howard Lutnick. How did he get his townhome? He bought it from Jeffrey Epstein through a shell company set up by Epstein and Les Wexner. No, his townhome was right next to Jeffrey Epstein's home. And Howard Lutnick is deeply involved in the Chabad Lubavitch cult, which is, Trump just met with them yesterday in the Oval Office. They're deeply involved in the settlement enterprise in Israel, in the movement to take over the Al-Aqsa compound. There are all these networks that organize on an ethno-supremacist basis that have now gotten so much power and so much control, particularly in this administration, although they enjoyed it in the Biden administration too, that it's become impossible to deny since October 7th. And they're exerting the power in a naked way, arresting students off the street for Rasmia Ozturk for being a visa green card holder, for writing. Actually, she just co-authored one single op-ed at Tufts criticizing her administration invalidating a student vote on BDS. And they just grabbed her off the street. And we can think of so many other examples. 300 Northwestern University students last week prevented from entering school because they won't take an anti-Semitism, which is basically just DEI for Jews only, an anti-Semitism training.
And worse, because it's not even like, okay, whatever you think about DEI, the anti-Semitism training, if it were just like, don't be an anti-Semite, everyone is equal, including Jewish people, fine. But it's not that. It's using the what's the acronym? The definition of anti-Semitism that is anti-Zionism. Yeah. And
it's using the IHRA
definition,
which
yes,
equates it with criticism of Israel. And this particular training seminar, which has been imposed under threat from the Trump administration via Israel, is a Zionist indoctrination course.
Yes.
And for Matt Taibbi, who's criticized woke DEI training seminars and just went all ballistic on Robin DiAngelo, who I also consider to be kind of a joke. And
of course,
Davos fellow Ibrahim X. Kendi, be consistent, but he can't be. And it's like, okay, you can even not like the left, and he can have his reasons. You can be a conservative, but it's about the principle. And if you're gonna wrap yourself in the cloth of the First Amendment and not talk about this, the most immediate, existential, titanic threat to the First Amendment, because you're afraid of the Zionist movement and you're afraid to critique Zionist power, then you're just irrelevant. You're not just being hypocritical. You're just going to lose relevance. And so the people that are pushing Matt on this are actually paying him a certain level of respect. That's how
I feel, to be honest. That's how I feel. I feel like if I didn't care, there are a lot of people who don't talk about Gaza, right? There are a lot of Zionists. There are a lot of everybody. I'm not inveighing against Bari Weiss for not talking about for not being pro-Palestinian because she is who she is. I
I am. Well, I mean, I hate who
are
she
you?
is. So,
I mean,
but I know
sure,
what you're
but
saying. I know what you're saying. And it's what his critics are saying is you're a talented writer. You haven't been afraid of power or to offend people in the past,
yes,
and you have a certain cachet more than most writers, and you should use it.
yes,
And you're not. So they're actually showing him respect. I mean, if they thought he was a complete clown, they wouldn't be lobbying for this. And
yes.
he's treating them with complete condescension, spending a lot of time to show them disrespect. And it's because he must be afraid of something here. But at this point, if you're going to spend that much energy defending your silence, you're going to lose relevance, and people will find other writers and other voices to follow. And that's the same. I think I can say the same for the various media assets and institutions that Zionists are taking over on behalf of Israel. Is they're going to lose credibility if they even had any left. There will be a mass exodus from TikTok, and people will just go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic playing out. I do wonder if he's going to lose the audience, right? Because some people say his issue is that he's audience captured, and I think I don't buy that because people have said the same thing about someone like Glenn Greenwald, but Glenn Greenwald hasn't folded on this. He's been incredibly consistent, right? And even if his audience gets mad at him, an audience that might be increasingly politically diversified and more conservative over the years because of coverage of things like Russiagate and all that, like it hasn't changed his ideological commitments. So I don't buy that. And it doesn't feel like a lot of people are fleeing Matt Taibbi's Substack because, maybe if there were kind of a financial consequences for this, it would change the equation. Maybe not. But on a bigger scale, it's kind of fascinating. Go ahead.
Can't we just establish that any credible writer should be willing to take a financial hit for their beliefs and their principles? I mean,
you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me. I didn't love losing that rising paycheck. I'm not gonna lie, but to me, the whole point of having access to that.
Oh, and how did you lose it? How did you lose it? Why did you lose it?
Speaking up,
Zionist power.
And it's the same, by the way, it's the same company, Nexstar, that fired Jimmy Kimmel, that, temporarily suspended Jimmy Kimmel. So, we're not, no one here is new to this game. And it is frustrating, I got to say, someone who's not a millionaire, unlike Matt Taibbi reportedly, to be taking these sorts of hits. I had Amanda Seales on the show recently. She's basically been X'd out of Hollywood as a consequence of speaking up for Palestine. It does sometimes feel like the people who have sort of the flexibility to lose the most aren't the ones that are willing to take the stand, with some exceptions here or there. And that is part of also, I think, the frustration with respect to Matt Taibbi. On the other side, you've got these extremely influential, extremely popular conservative figures like Candace Owens, like Tucker Carlson, like Dave Smith, who are willing to be incredibly powerful advocates for Palestine, so much so that they're now being deemed the woke right by other conservatives. And I do wonder how you see that coming to the head as someone who, follows that side of the aisle and, has done interviews and has some experience with these people.
I just feel like as a writer or a pundit or whatever you are, you can't isolate yourself from the world. And I lived in the world during COVID and I didn't like it. And I saw how it was damaging to our social fabric. I saw the grift by tech billionaires. I saw digital ID coming down the pike and that it was going to be used to limit our access to social benefits. And now it's happening. It's becoming law in the UK. And I saw vaccine passports as a direct highway, sort of like a super highway to digital ID and social credit. I had this critique of COVID that completely alienated large segments of the institutional left, or what I call the professional sectarian left. And, people castigated me and I lost friends and I took whatever a financial hit through, the different crowdfunding sources we had. And I think, many of my critiques have proven correct, but I wasn't out to just alienate the left or something. It was just that I didn't want to live in that kind of society. And that's where my critique of Zionism comes from as well. So I think, if you're afraid to piss off your audience, that speaks to a sort of a lack of credibility. This shouldn't be seen as a business. You should be willing to go. You should be willing to go get another job if this business isn't working out for you, instead of transforming into a hollow influencer. That's when you become an influencer.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's where Matt is, but I did see that he mildly criticized some of the Trump administration's Israel-centric speech crackdown. I can't remember what it was. And he was just getting demolished in the comments on his Substack post, because he has cultivated an audience of MAGA, boomer types through his a lot of his critiques of the Biden administration, which a lot of them were right on. So I'm not saying that's where he is, but I'm just making this point about what I think the responsibility of a journalist or a writer is. It really has to come from principles and your passion, and not from the incentivization that comes from crowdfunding.
Well, speaking of one's role as a writer or journalist or a media figure, pundit, what have you, that's a really good segue to, I know the last thing I want to talk to you about, a conversation I know you've been interested in, and which I've been very preoccupied with myself. I've now watched it 3 times, which is this interview between Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ezra Klein. Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.